Hi, my name is Camila Aguila, and my presentation is on Folly Island in South Carolina. So, just a little bit about its history. So, Folly Island first appears in official records in 1696 when a colonial land grant uses the name for its very first time. So, the name Folly actually it comes from Old English and it means thick woods. It kind of maybe like reflects the dense foliage that once covered the island. Before colonists arrived, there was the Bohicket tribe that lived there. However, they were forcibly moved like off the island. Moving on to the 1700s and 1800s, early colonists and map makers they continued referring to the land as Folly, and historical sources, which includes the USGS and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they note that the name was already well established by the 18th century. And they actually have an interpretation that suggests that the land was considered a foolish idea to settle because of its like vulnerability to storms. Ownership was passed among landowners, and the island often served as a temporary refuge for survivors of frequent shipwrecks, which leads to the shipwreck in 1832. There was about 120 survivors from the wreck of the Amelia, and they quarantined in Folly Island. They were quarantined for cholera, actually. And then in 1863, during the Civil War, Union troops occupied Folly Island. They built roads, forts, artillery batteries, and just there was about I think 13,000 troops that were stationed there, and it was a major staging ground for the attack on Fort Sumter. After the war, through the late 1800s and 1940s, Folly was largely abandoned after the war, but they gradually evolved from like kind of small little camps into a growing beach community. And then by 1883, there was newspapers such as the South Carolina State Gazette that mentions Folly as a very popular beach and a picnic getaway for a lot of Charleston residents. In 1903, the Folly Beach Land Company began promoting tourism, and this led to new hotels, trolley access, and beachfront development. Then in 1941, we had World War II, and the US kind of acquired land and built an anti aircraft artillery training center in Folly Island, and this kind of just reshaped parts of the island. And then from the 1940s to the 1960s, there was rapid construction, right? There was the construction of the Ocean Plaza, amusement rides, shops, the iconic Folly Pier. And in 1989, this is when Hurricane Hugo occurred. So, Hurricane Hugo was a very intense hurricane and it devastated the island. It destroyed homes, it severely eroded the beaches. But Folly did rebuild quickly. And then by the mid 1900s, tourism was flourishing. It was growing. Folly earned the nickname the People's Beach. And finally, from the late 1900s to today, it continues to grow as a very vibrant beach community. And it focuses on environmental sustainability and just want they preserve that kind of like laid back beach spirit. Um, So, Folly Island is a barrier island and beach town off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina. So, here we have a little map of uh, Folly Island. Here, this is the barrier island, Folly Island. The total area is about 18.9 square miles, which this includes 12.5 square miles of land and about 6.4 square miles of water. So it is nicknamed the Edge of the World or the Edge of America because of its known relaxed, beach vibe. It's full of surf shops, local restaurants, and it has like that, that free-spirited beach culture. And I believe, like a lot, like why a lot of people get attracted to this like beach community is the outdoor recreational activities that it offers. Like this island is super popular for its surfing, fishing, kayaking, bird watching, and other eco-based activities. And one of the most recognizable features is the Folly Beach Pier. So here we have this long fishing and walking pier that extends into the Atlantic Ocean. And even though the there's only about a few thousand, I think 2,000 permanent residents that live on this island. However, during tourist seasons, like visitation spikes dramatically. So here I'll be discussing some of the island's natural features. So Folly River flows along part of the island, which contributes to its marshy and tidal environment. The island is fairly flat, with dunes reaching elevations up to about 14 feet, and because of its low-lying terrain, Folly is highly susceptible to erosion, especially at the two ends of the very island. The island does support a lot of different diverse wildlife, such as coastal birds, which includes herons and shorebirds, as well as other marine species like dolphins. Importantly, Folly is also a sea turtle nesting site, so this is why so many conservation efforts, especially during nesting season, they focus kind of on protecting both dunes and nighttime lighting. So here in the picture, you see the picture above, you see some of their natural sand dunes, and then below we see one of their shorebirds. So I'll be talking now a little bit about their Folly Island's past disasters. So the first one is Hurricane Hazel. So Hazel hit the hardest further north of Folly Island. So Folly Island was on the edge of the most destructive area. However, records show that there was very light property damage, there was slight beach erosion in Folly Island, and there was only a storm surge of about 8.3 feet above mean sea level. While the storm surge obviously did reach Foley, it wasn't catastrophic, and the island did not require major rebuilding. Next, we have Hurricane Gracie in 1959. So Gracie made landfall as a strong hurricane near St. Helena Sound. I believe it was a Category 4. The Charleston region, which includes Folly Island, they experienced a 6 to 8 foot storm surge, high winds, and very heavy rainfall. Folly, they sustained um, coastal flooding, erosion, downed trees, roof damage, and power outages. Recovery focused on the removal of debris and repairs. And Gracie, this hurricane influenced later decisions about beach nourishment and shoreline management. The third is Hurricane Hugo in 1989, and this hurricane was catastrophic for Folly Island. USGS reports a 10-foot storm surge, and many dune lines were completely eroded after this intense hurricane. Storm, storm surge and waves, they reached up to 13 to 14 feet, which destroyed a lot of oceanfront homes. About like 30 to 80% of homes became uninhabitable after this hurricane. And recovery did include emergency dune rebuilding, large scale sand scraping, and long term changes to coastal management. And till this day, Hugo remains one of the most defining storms in Folly's history. The last is Hurricane Irma that happened in 2017. Hurricane Irma produced severe storm surge that kind of pushed water through beach access points into residential areas. Winds reached up to 70 miles per hour, but most of the damage came from flooding and erosion. Irma caused major loss of sand dunes, riverside flooding, and the displacement of the iconic Folly boat. Recovery did involve emergency sand replacement, property repairs, and updated resilience planning. So here, these two pictures above, this is the aftermath of Hurricane Hugo, actually. And then this picture in the bottom, this boat, which is called the Folly boat, It kind of washed up here after Hurricane Hugo, but with Hurricane Irma, it was displaced. So let's discuss a little bit about Folly Island's socioeconomic conditions. So Folly Island is generally an affluent and older community. It has a high median age, around 62.7 years old, a high per capita income, and high housing prices. Education levels, they're also pretty high. Many residents hold a bachelor degrees or higher. Um, However, these factors they all contribute to housing pressures. It makes year-round living difficult for lower and middle income workers. So here we see a little bit of the stats. So the population in 2025 was 2,086. They have a 0.1% growing rate. The poverty rate is 8.77%. And here, this graph shows kind of the demographics. So around 94% of the residents are white, 3% is around two or more races, and then 2% is Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander. So here we have a little bit about the housing and cost of living, the employment and tourism. So the employment data from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers shows about 26.4% of Folly's workforce is in social services. So this includes education, healthcare, and social assistance. And then significant sectors also include the food service, which is about 12%, retail at 10%, and professional and technical services, which is at around 10% as well. Tourism is actually very important for the economy of Folly Island. Um, Visitor spending generates about $117 million a year. It supports 1,200 jobs, and it produces about $400 million in wages. Tourism taxes bring in more than $22 million annually, and the average overnight visitor spends about $1,160 per person per trip. And visitation is estimated at 500,000 day trip visitors and 1 million overnight stays each year. So, tourism also supports property values. So, beach health protects about $500 million in property, and beach nourishment investments are said to return $37 in economic benefit for every dollar spent. So, as we can see, tourism is a very large part of Folly Island's economy. So, some of the current issues that is occurring in Folly Island is coastal erosion and dune degradation. So, this is worsened by heavy foot traffic, storm impacts, and concentrated access points. This reduces the beach width and increases vulnerability to storms. So, these pictures here on the slide you can see are examples of coastal erosion on Folly Beach. Next is wildlife impacts. So, um, wildlife involves sea turtles and shorebirds. So, artificial lighting, nighttime tourism, and beach activity can all disrupt nesting. And without the proper conservation measures like lighting ordinances and protected nesting zones, nesting success will decline. Marine debris and water quality. So these issues increase with visitor boating, fishing, and storm-driven debris. NOAA and local agencies They regularly clean up the debris, especially after storms like Irma. And then tourism also strains infrastructure, including parking, waste systems, and public services. Seasonal overcrowding leads to congestion and higher waste management needs. Finally, we have housing pressures that emerge due to short-term rentals. So this is called STRs. So STRs they increase a property values, but they reduce long-term housing availability. So Folly Island they actively regulate STRs to kind of maintain year-round livability. In order to combat the current threats to Folly Island, They are involved in multiple plans and projects, one of them being the local comprehensive beach management plan, specifically the beach and dune management. So, this is led by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and it's basically a major beach nourishment project that occurs every 8 to 10 years, along with emergency renourishment. The city itself, they enforce strict dune protection laws, and they partner with schools and volunteers for planting and fencing programs, for example, like the Sand Fencing and Planting Partnerships program. They they also maintain one of the state's strongest sea turtle programs with nest monitoring, lighting rules, and relocation when necessary. Major habitats, which include the Lighthouse Inlet Heritage Preserve, are protected through state and county partnerships. Folly also enforces SCR caps, which are the short term rental caps. They also enforce zoning limits, occupancy rules, and noise ordinances. Visitor education campaigns and regulated parking systems, like we see in this picture here. Um, they all help manage behavior and congestion. Also, stormwater drainage improvements, climate adaptation planning, FEMA flood mapping, and plastic bans all help support environmental resilience and reduce pollution. And then groups like Keep Folly Funky and the Surfrider Foundation, they all help provide input and run cleanups, promote sustainable tourism, and advocate for water quality. Folly coordinates with hurricane preparedness with county, state, and federal agencies. Post storm recovery uses FEMA funds, updated building codes, and um, emergency dune rebuilding. Folly also uses land use controls and zoning to prevent overdevelopment. They preserve natural buffers, promote eco friendly tourism, and they develop future sustainability strategies that kind of focuses on green infrastructure and renewable energy. And then these two pictures that we see here, it's the one on top is them pumping sand onto the beach. And this is one of their beach nourishment projects. And then at the bottom, we see the construction of a groin. This is to prevent further erosion. And then, like I mentioned before, this is the parking sign to kind of enforce, um, strict parking regulations. You have to pay, etc. Here are my citations, and thank you for watching.